Mr. President. I appreciate it. I want to ask you about school-age kids and food. One of the real problems when you shut down the schools, these are kids on reduced and free lunch programs. They need these meals to make it through their day, and with districts shutting down school, what, if anything, can the federal government do to make sure that the kids still get decent meals as long as the schools are out?
Well, you know, we don't want the schools shut down. We want the schools to open, and especially very young children handle it, all children, but especially very young children handle it very well. So we want schools open. We don't want to be in that position. We want schools open. We've made payment, and we would, frankly, if the school isn't going to open, we would much rather follow the child with the payment, give the money to the child, meaning the parents of the child, and let the parents do what they have to do, including bringing the child to another school. Because we're finding that whether it's parents or children, people want to get back to school. They want to have their life back. Some people say the Democrats don't want schools open because that's where you have a lot of polling booths. And if you have a school closed, you can't very easily have polling booths at the school. And that's becoming, I think, maybe we'll be able to show that as fact. But that's another thing that they're doing to try and keep people away from the polls. So we have to look into that, but it's you've been reading about it, I've been reading about it, and I don't like it. But we'd like to see the schools open. Then we don't have that problem. Good question. Thank you, Chris.
Mr. President, what's your understanding of how long Israel will suspend its West Bank annexation plan?
What do you think? Tell me.
Well, we're putting all our eggs into the basket of peace. We have an agreement with the Emirates. We're going to nail down all the details, embassies, overflights, commercial. Then we're going to extrapolate that to the rest of the region. How long that takes, I can't tell you, but we've prioritized peace over the sovereignty movement. But it's not off the table. It's just something that will be deferred until we give peace every single chance.
And what do you want the Palestinians to take away from this deal, since they're not really a party to it?
Well, but they are supported largely by some of the countries that we're talking to and that have already signed, you know, in the case of the one country, but others will be following. And I think the Palestinians will, without saying it necessarily yet, I think they very much want to be a part of what we're doing. And I see ultimately the Palestinians, I see peace between Israel and the Palestinians. I see that happening. I think as these very big, powerful, wealthy countries come in, I think the Palestinians will follow quite naturally. Yeah, please.
Do you believe that a deal could have been reached without Israel's agreement to temporarily suspend annexation?
Say it again. Could you make it louder?
Do you believe that a deal could have been reached without Israel's agreement to temporarily suspend annexation?
What do you think about that, David? It's interesting.
I think you can't do both at the same time. So I think, again, prioritize peace. Sovereignty, after peace is given every opportunity to turn to sovereignty. I don't think the two could have been done at the same time.
And have you asked Israel to permanently consider abandoning annexation?
No, this is a temporary process. There's been no request.
Okay. Please, Caitlin.
Mr. President, this morning you said that you do not want to fund the U.S. Postal Service because Democrats are trying to expand voting by mail. So I've got two questions for you. One, are you threatening to veto any legislation that includes funding for the post office?
No, not at all. No.
So you would sign something that does include funding?
A separate thing, I would do it. But one of the reasons the post office needs that much money is to have all of these millions of ballots coming in from nowhere, and nobody knows from where and where they're going. You saw what happened in Caitlin in Virginia. It was 500,000 applications coming in, going all over the state. Nobody even knows where they came from. You saw what happened in New York, which was a disaster with Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney. It was a basic disaster. And you see Paterson, New Jersey, what's going on there. And we can give you many other locations and sites. What has happened is that's part of a big negotiation. That's actually small part of a big negotiation to get more money to people that it wasn't their fault. It was China's fault. And post office is part of it. Another part of it is they want $3.5 billion just for the ballots themselves. Why it's so much, I don't know, but that's what the Democrats want. But if the bill isn't going to get done, that would mean the post office isn't going to get funded. And that would also mean that the $3.5 billion isn't going to be taken care of. So I don't know how you could possibly use these ballots, these mail-in ballots. Absentee ballots, by the way, are fine. But the universal mail-ins that are just sent all over the place, where people can grab them and grab stacks of them and sign them and do whatever you want, that's the thing we're against.
But isn't that precisely the problem, is that you're saying you do not want to give this post office funding in this coronavirus legislation? They say they need it so they can be prepared, so if the pandemic is still going on in November when the election happens and people don't feel safe to go vote in person, they can vote by mail, and it can be safe and it can be secure.
I can understand the post office, and if we could agree to a bill, the overall bill, which is obviously a much bigger number than just the post office, that would be fine. But they have the post office as one of their requests. It's their request.
Right, but this morning you said you were against it, didn't you?
I'm only against, what I'm against is I'm against doing anything where the people aren't taken care of, and the people aren't being taken care of properly. We want people to get money. It wasn't their fault that they got shut down. They got shut down by China. So whether it's the post office or whether it's the $3.5 billion, you know, they're asking for $3.5 billion just for the universal mail-in ballots, but they're not willing to make a deal. These are 2 points within a very big deal. The thing they want more than anything else, Caitlin, and you know this, is bailout money for the states and for the cities that are in trouble, which for the most part are Democrat-run states and cities. So New York has a problem, California has a problem, Illinois has a tremendous problem, and others. They want to be able to bail out these states, and we don't want to be doing that, or certainly don't want to do it to the extent they're looking for $1 trillion. We don't want to be doing that. Please, go ahead.
I'm just really confused, because this morning you said they need that money in order to make the post office work so it can take all these millions and millions of ballots, and you said that would be fraudulent. So it sounded like you said you're blocking.
No, I said it will end up being fraudulent, because if you look at what's happened over the last few weeks, just look at the few instances where this has happened, it's turned out to be fraudulent. Well, if you look at New York, it was fraudulent. If you look at Paterson, New Jersey, it was fraudulent. Of course there is. The whole thing is a mess. In fact, Carolyn Maloney's opponent he's gone crazed. He said they took the election away from him, and he may be right. I think they should redo that election. And if you look at Virginia, it's terrible. Look at some of the things that have happened in California. Look at California, where they found 1 million non-eligible voters. That was done by Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch. We have to have an honest election. And if it's not going to be an honest election, I guess people have to sit down and think really long and hard about it. But if the post office, if they're not going to approve a bill, and the post office therefore won't have the money, and if they're not going to approve a big bill, a bigger bill, and they're not going to have the $3.5 billion for the universal mail-in votes, how can you have those votes? What would mean is the people will have to go to the polls and vote, like the old days, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. They have to go to the. It doesn't say anybody's taking the vote away, but it means that the universal mail-ins don't work. Absentees do work. It's a very different thing. An absentee, where you make an application and you send it in, they send you a vote, it's different. But so, Caitlin, I'm not saying anything wrong with voting. I want them to vote. But that would mean that they'd have to go to a voting booth like they used to and vote.
Even if they don't feel safe voting in person? People want to vote by mail because...
Well, they're going to have to feel safe, and they will be safe, and we will make sure that they're safe. And we're not going to have to spend $3.5 billion to do it. And when you go to a voting, it would be wonderful if we had voting ID, and some states have that and some states don't because they can't get it passed. Most states want it. But we want people to vote, but we want people to vote so when they vote, it means one vote. It doesn't mean ballots all over the place. You saw what was happening in Virginia, where piles of ballot applications are dropped all over the state. They had them named after dogs. They had them named after dead people. We want to have an accurate vote. I'm not doing this for any reason. Maybe the other turns out to be my advantage. I don't know. I can't tell you that. But I do know this. I just want an accurate vote. And it's a fair question, by the way. So does everybody else. Okay.
Mr. President, how does the accord today between Israel and the UAE help struggling and persecuted Christians in the Middle East?
Help what?
How does it help struggling and persecuted Christians in the Middle East, the deal today?
Well, I think it's going to. I think it's a big start, and you're right about that. Christians have been persecuted by some countries in particular in the Middle East, and I think this is a big start. It's going to be a very strong start, very powerful start, and it's something that I will tell you, I've told David, and I've told every one of our negotiators, if you look at the way Christians have been treated in some countries, it's beyond disgraceful. It's if I had information and if I had absolute proof, some of the stories that we've heard, which is not easy to get, I would go in and do a number to those countries like you wouldn't believe what they do to Christians in the Middle East, and it's disgraceful. It's disgraceful. You're right. It's a very big part of the overall negotiation. And as countries come in, for instance, UAE has agreed very strongly to represent us. I think they will very well with respect to Christianity, because in the Middle East it's not treated well. It's not treated well at all. It's treated horribly and very unfairly, and it's criminal what's happened. And that's for many, many years. I think it's a great question and it's a very unfair situation. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Larry Kudlow said that there's a routine check-in call with China on the Phase 1 trade deal. My question is, what if they bring up TikTok and also WeChat? Would you instruct your team to engage them on that executive order?
We have a deadline of September 15th. And whether it's Microsoft, I understand, and others are negotiating. We also said that obviously it's worthless if we don't allow them into the country. So we said that the United States Treasury is going to be getting something out of this deal, something very substantial. But what we want is total security. But we have a deadline of September 15th. So I know Microsoft and others are very interested in it. But that's our deadline. And it has to be proven to be totally secure. We don't want to have any information going into China with what we've been through. And I have to tell you, you talked about the deal. You mentioned the Phase 1 deal. Well, the Phase 1 deal, it's a very interesting situation because you've been hearing the largest order of corn in history, the largest order of soybeans, the largest order of beef. They've done more than they've ever done. So you're going to have to figure that one out. With where I'm coming from, I could have, because they see my attitude. My attitude toward China is not friendly, but they have gone into orders that are extremely large, and our farmers are very happy. But with what they did with respect to the pandemic, the plague that came in from China, it just is a different feeling. It was an incredible deal, but I have a very different feeling. But they are giving the Midwest, our farmers, among the largest orders they've ever seen. Somebody told me today, Bob Lighthart, that it's about 40% of what they're selling now is going to China. So maybe they're trying to make me change my mind a little bit, because you know my attitude on China, and it hasn't been very good. Well, we're not talking to them. No, we're talking to the companies. In theory, it's a company, but it's a company within China. That means China. And the deal will have to be substantially beneficial to the United States, and we need total security. Okay?
Mr. President. Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President, can you say whether you yourself think that annexation should be off the table for Israel, and if so, have you communicated that to
Well, not
Prime
off the
Minister?
table. No, it's something they've discussed, but Israel has agreed not to do that. I mean, more than just off the table. They've agreed not to do it. And I think that was very important, and I think it was a great concession by Israel, and I think it was a very smart concession by Israel. But, David, do you have anything further to add on
Prime
that?
Minister was pretty clear today at his own press conference that he considers this to be a temporary suspension and that the deal would still be open to him at some point in the future. I'm asking what you think he should do. Should he
Well,
actually
right now,
write it
all I
off?
can say, it's off the table. So I can't talk about sometime into the future. That's a big statement. But right now, it's off the table. Is that a correct statement, Mr. Ambassador?
Yes, the word suspend was chosen carefully by all the parties. Suspend, by definition, look it up, that means temporary halt. It's off the table now, but it's not off the table permanently.
Go ahead.
Mr. President,
Thank you so much. Just to follow to some of the questions that Caitlin was asking, you said you do want an accurate vote. Would
That's right.
you direct the Postmaster General to reverse some of the policy changes that have
No,
occurred
not at
there
all.
in order to prevent delays?
No, I wouldn't do that at all. No, I want the post office to run properly, but, which makes sense, they would need a lot more money if they're going to be taking in tens of millions of ballots that just come out of the sky from nowhere. And so they need additional financial help. It's a part of the bill that the Democrats don't want to make because they want $1 trillion, much bigger part of the bill. They want $1 trillion to go to states that are run by governors who happen to be Democrats who have not done a good job for many, many years. And those are states that owe a lot of money and need a lot of money, and they're talking about $1 trillion. So the post office and the $3.5 billion for the votes themselves, which sounds like a lot of money they're looking for. $3.5 billion. Think of that, $3.5 billion to have mail-in ballots. Again, absentee good, universal mail-in very bad.
Taking a step back, one quick follow-up. Given that the negotiations are still ongoing about whether to get more money to the Postal Service, why not put more resources and more money yourself? Find a way to do that to make sure there is a
Well, they
free
can
and
do it
fair
very
election.
easily. All they have to do is make a deal. If they make a deal, the Postal Service is taken care of. The money they need for the mail-in ballots would be taken care of if we agree to it. That doesn't mean we're going to agree to it. But all they have to do is make a deal. But again, more important to them is not that. That's a lot of money, but it's small time compared to the other. What they want to do, and very, very, very strongly what they want to do, is bail out cities that are run by Democrats and have been for many years. And these cities and states have done very badly, and they desperately need money for that. And we're open to something, but we're not open to the kind of money that they need. Go ahead, please.
Mr. President, very quickly, my question for you is just what are
Just
you
1
doing-
second, please. Go
What are
ahead.
you doing as president to make sure there is a free and fair election?
That the what?
What are you doing as president to make sure there is a free and fair election?
So everyone talks about Russia, Russia, Russia. They talk about China, China. They talk about all of these different countries that come in and run our elections, which is false. But what they don't talk about are things like very loose mail-in ballots, universal in nature, that frankly Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, all of these countries that we are reading about, hearing about, and in some cases they're writing about intelligence-wise, these countries can grab those ballots or print forgeries of those ballots, and they would go out and they would have a field day. This is the easiest way for the mail-in ballots, is the easiest way for a country like a China or a Russia or a North Korea or Iran. I hear Iran too, that was part of the report. This would be very easy for them. This is much easier than, well, we have been very strong. Now, if you remember, President Obama was informed about Russia by the FBI in September. The election was in November. President Obama decided to do absolutely nothing about it. People don't mention that very much anymore. That's a lost fact. But he was informed very powerfully that they're going to do, and President Obama did nothing. We have done a lot, and we've really shored it up. But what people can never prepare for are millions and millions of mail-in ballots, because they can be forged, they can be captured, they can be taken. No, well, that's a very hard thing to do. We have to make sure that we can do that. Please.
So, Mr. President, after 3.5 years, do you regret at all the lying you've done to the American people? On
All the what?
everything? All the lying, all the dishonesties
That who has done?
you have done. Tens of
Yeah,
thousands.
go ahead, please. Please. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask about the payroll tax
Go ahead.
cut. One, is it going to be optional or mandatory for employers to defer and not collect the payroll tax?
So we're-
And if I have a follow-up on
The
that.
payroll tax is very important and a very big benefit to people, as you know, to companies, because we want the companies to be strong, but now directly to people. And it's a very big number, and we're taking care of it, and this will go directly to the people, the workers within the company. It's a payroll tax. It's called a payroll tax cut. We're cutting the payroll tax, and it's a very large number, and that will go directly to the workers of the company.
Well, employers collect that through FICA, will that be are they going to be required not to collect that money?
You mean later on? You mean later on at a later
Right now,
date?
so September 1, when I get my paycheck, will it
The
be up to
employers,
my?
the employers will collect it and give it, most likely. The employers will collect it and give it, okay? Please, go ahead.
Follow
Mr.
up on
President,
that?
I have 2 questions. The first one on domestic politics. There are claims
Can't understand a
There
word
are
you're
claims
saying.
circulating in social media that Kamala Harris is not eligible to run for vice president because she was an anchor baby, I quote. Do you or can you definitively say whether or not Kamala Harris is eligible, meets the legal requirements to run as vice president?
So I just heard that. I heard it today that she doesn't meet the requirements. And by the way, the lawyer that wrote that piece is a very highly qualified, very talented lawyer. I have no idea if that's right. I would have assumed the Democrats would have checked that out before she gets chosen to run for vice president. But that's a very serious. You're saying that they're saying that she doesn't qualify because she wasn't born in this country.
No, she was born in this country, but her parents did not. The claims say that her parents did not receive their permanent residence at that
Yeah,
time.
I don't know about it. I just heard about it. I'll take a look. Back in the
Mr. President, a follow-up on UNGA. Ambassador Kelly Craft recently said that you, or she's hoping that you might be able to deliver the speech in front of the UN General Assembly in person, even though other leaders will be sending in their video recordings. Can you confirm that?
Yeah, I'm thinking about going directly to the UN to do the speech. A lot of people will not, because of COVID, will not be able to be there, as you know. But I think it's appropriate if we can do it, I'll do it directly. And again, this will not be like in the past because some countries won't be able to escape the problems they're having. You know, countries are having a tremendous problem with the China virus. So we'll see what happens. But I would prefer doing it. I can do it the other way. I can do it viral, as they say. I can do it in that form, but I'd rather be at the United Nations, deliver it. I think it better represents the country. Also, I feel sort of at least a semi-obligation as the President of the United States to be at the United Nations to deliver what will be an important speech.
Would you still do it if the room is empty?
Well, the room won't be empty. The room will have different people there and representatives of countries. But I can understand how it's very difficult for countries to be there. They won't be there only for that reason. They'd love to be there. I've already had people call, in fact, say, a couple of them, I'd love to be there. If you want, I'll be there. I said, don't be there. You don't have to be there. No, the room would be, I think the room will not be, although there may be a spacing requirement like you have in this room. This room was always packed. This room would be packed again if we had the seats open, but you have a spacing requirement, so I understand that the United Nations, they may have that too. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question on the peace deal, but if you don't mind, could I defer my question to Amela Khan from Epic Times?
Sure, yes. Please.
Thank you, Mr.
Please.
President.
Thank you.
I would like to ask your opinion about what recently happened in Hong Kong, recent attack on press freedom in Hong Kong, and Jimmy Lai was arrested, his newsroom was raided. How will the U.S. respond to this?
Well, I think it's a terrible thing, but one thing that we have done, we gave tremendous incentives to Hong Kong because of freedom. We want freedom. And we were giving tremendous economic incentives to Hong Kong, and we have now withdrawn all of those incentives. And it will be impossible for Hong Kong to compete with the United States with respect to that. It just won't be, because we've taken all of the incentives away. If you look at China with the World Trade Organization as an example, they're getting tremendous because they're considered a developing nation, which is ridiculous. Why should they be a developing nation, but we're not? And they get tremendous incentives. We have, by the way, told them it's unacceptable, and we've been doing that for a long time. They understand exactly how we feel, and big changes are being made. But with respect to Hong Kong, they get tremendous financial incentives so that they could do business and compete in the world. We've now withdrawn all of those incentives. It's going to be very hard for Hong Kong to compete. And I will tell you that the United States, and I say this from any standpoint you want to hear it, will end up making a lot more money because of it, because we lost a lot of business to Hong Kong. We made it very convenient for people to go there, for companies to go there. We've withdrawn all of that. And the United States will be a big beneficiary from an economic standpoint. but I hate to see what happened to Hong Kong because freedom is a great thing. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, great Patriots. Thank you so much for joining us here at Golden State Times. If you guys liked our coverage, make sure you give it a thumbs up and you share it on social media. Make sure you share this video on Facebook and Twitter and Gab and Reddit and all of those social media sites and let Patriots know just in case they missed it. Thank you so much once again. If you are new to the channel, we encourage you to subscribe and click that notification bell. We stream all of President Trump's press conferences, news conferences, and press briefings and speeches and all that good stuff. If you guys missed any of our previous videos from today, President Trump talking about the peace deal that they reached, that was earlier today. Also, Kayleigh McEnany had a press briefing earlier today. That should also be coming up on your screen. It would also be pinned to the very top of the comments below. We have now reached 400,000 Patriots here on the channel. That is a huge milestone. And we want to thank every single one of you, from the Patriots that have been with us to the very beginning, to the Patriots that just barely became a member or a subscriber today. Thank you so much for being the best part of Golden State Times. We hope that you guys join us on the next one here live. Thank you so much once again for joining us. If you haven't yet, subscribe and click that notification bell. And also, if you want to get notified for future live streams, events and stuff like that, make sure you sign up to our email list on our website, goldenstatetimes.com. Again, that's www.goldenstatetimes.com, goldenstatetimes.com. Make sure you go head over there, sign up to our email list. It's 100% free, and you'll get notified every single time that we go live.